So usually when we talk about a home invasion, right, the parameters are, well, they're completely tied to the physical world.
Right, yeah, like physical space.
Exactly. Like someone shatters a pane of glass or, they splinter a door frame. They cross this very defined, tangible threshold into your space.
Yeah, and there's proof. There's a police report, a broken
A
lock.
muddy footprint.
Exactly. The threat is totally localized to your physical environment.
Right. But for this deep dive, I want to shift that paradigm completely.
Okay.
Imagine a scenario for a second where the ultimate private sanctuary, like the only territory that is truly entirely yours, was breached without a single broken window.
You're talking about the mind.
I am talking about your own mind. Imagine if your internal monologue, that quiet space where you draft your ideas, your anxieties, your most private
The
thoughts.
stuff you'd never say out loud.
Right. Imagine if that space was claimed to be actively hacked and monitored by an external force.
Which is just a staggering scenario.
Yeah, it really is. And that is exactly the scenario we are unpacking today. And it all comes from a very specific, deeply intense stack of source material.
Yeah, we're looking at comprehensive transcripts and excerpts from a broadcast called Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf.
Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf. It's quite a title.
It is. And specifically, we are analyzing their Friday finale broadcast,
Right.
which is built around what they heavily promote as a, quote, redacted world-exclusive interview.
Yeah, the host of the show, who goes by the moniker Lone Wolf, he conducts this huge interview with two central figures.
Jesse Beltran and Edward Zaul.
Right, Beltran and Zaul. And the narrative they build across this entire broadcast is just, well, it's a highly coordinated, terrifying picture of a massive covert technological rollout by global intelligence agencies.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is. But before we get into the biological mechanics they claim are at play or the legal warfare they discuss, we really need to establish the exact analytical lens we are using for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the claims made by Lone Wolf, Beltran, and Zaul are explosive.
Very.
I mean, they are alleging a literal war on human cognition by state actors.
Right, which requires us to be extremely clear about our role here. We are impartially reporting and dissecting the architecture of the claims made in Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf.
Impartially being the key word.
Exactly. We are not validating these viewpoints. We're not endorsing this narrative as absolute truth. Our objective is just to understand how this specific narrative is constructed.
Right, like how the sources link their supposed evidence.
Yeah, and the rhetorical strategies they use to persuade their audience, we are essentially examining the anatomy of a massive, highly controversial claim.
So let's look at the actual mechanism of the weapon they're describing.
Yeah, because they don't just speak in vague terms, right? Like, they don't just say mind control and leave it at that.
No, not at all. Beltran and Zaul hinge their entire argument on a very specific material.
Graphene oxide.
Exactly. According to the broadcast, intelligence agencies have, quote, perfected the use of graphene oxide nanoparticles to achieve something they call synthetic telepathy.
Synthetic telepathy. I mean, the terminology there is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Oh, yeah. Because when we hear telepathy, we usually default to, like, the organic science fiction concept, right?
You're right, like two minds communicating through some biological mutation or something.
Yeah. But by attaching the word synthetic, Beltran and Zaul are shifting the concept from biology to engineered infrastructure.
Wild.
Right. They are describing a manufactured technological intrusion designed to interface directly with the human nervous system.
And looking at the pseudoscience they outlined, they chose graphene oxide for a very specific reason, didn't they?
They did. Graphene is highly conductive. It's this two-dimensional lattice of carbon.
Right.
And it interacts aggressively with electromagnetic frequencies.
Okay, so in the narrative presented in the broadcast, once these microscopic particles are introduced into the body...
They claim it crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Which is terrifying. The claim is that they essentially attach to the neural network and act as, like, microscopic antennas.
Yeah, microscopic antennas. They supposedly translate the electrical impulses of your brain into readable radio waves.
Unbelievable.
Waves that can just be picked up by an external monitoring system.
So think of the human brain as a highly secure, closed-circuit security system.
Okay, yeah.
You can't just tap into it from the outside without physically cutting into the skull and wiring a hardline connection.
Right, the ultimate closed system.
But what the concept of synthetic telepathy via nanoparticles suggests is that you don't need to break the camera.
You simply dust the internal wiring with a highly conductive, invisible powder.
Exactly. And that powder broadcasts the closed-circuit signal out into the open air.
Where it can be intercepted by a receiver parked, miles away.
Which brings up a massive logistical hurdle that Beltran, Zaul, and Lone Wolf seem to just vault right over.
Absolutely. The scale of it.
Right. They're incredibly explicit that this isn't like a DARPA beta test happening in a sterile underground laboratory somewhere.
No, they state unequivocally that this technology is already deployed worldwide.
Already deployed worldwide. I mean, I have to challenge the sheer physics and logistics of that claim.
Yeah, it's a massive claim.
If a synthetic, highly conductive nanomaterial has been covertly introduced into the global population, wouldn't independent biohackers or, university medical labs have noticed?
You'd think so, yeah.
Or even rival nations' health screening protocols. Wouldn't they have detected a sudden, inexplicable spike of synthetic nanotech in the global blood supply?
Right.
I mean, you cannot hide a physical material inside billions of human beings from every microscope on Earth. So how did the sources explain away the deafening silence of the entire global medical community?
Well, they bridge that massive logical gap with one of the darkest phrases used in the entire broadcast.
What's that?
They call it perfected non-consensual human experimentation. Yeah. By framing the deployment that way, they attempt to neutralize the lack of mainstream medical consensus.
Oh, I see.
They suggest that the experimentation was compartmentalized, hidden within other vectors.
Or the medical community itself is either compromised, right?
Exactly. Or maybe that they just lack the specific classification of equipment needed to identify the proprietary frequency of these exact nanoparticles.
Okay, so it elevates the claim from passive surveillance like, say, the NSA sweeping up metadata from cell towers.
Right, to an active, unauthorized biological and cognitive intervention.
They are literally arguing that the testing phase for this synthetic telepathy was conducted on everyday people without their knowledge.
Yeah, and that this hidden phase has now reached perfection.
Perfection. That is a chilling word in this context.
Truly. Because if a broadcast is going to claim a global biological rollout of an experimental technology, they inevitably have to account for a physical footprint.
Right, you can't just wave a wand.
No, you cannot experiment on millions of complex biological systems without massive visible side effects.
Bodies reject foreign materials.
Exactly. Frequencies cause cellular damage.
So this is exactly how Beltran and Zaul pivot to their next piece of supposed proof.
Yeah, they attempt to anchor their invisible nanotech to a very visible, highly publicized reality.
Right. They point directly to Havana Syndrome.
Which is a huge pivot.
It is. For years, Havana Syndrome has been this highly debated medical mystery, right?
Globally.
We've seen diplomats, intelligence officers, and civilian personnel reporting sudden, debilitating neurological trauma.
Yeah, vertigo, severe cognitive fog, intense localized pressure in the head.
Strange auditory sensations, all of it.
And the official governmental and medical narratives have bounced wildly around it.
Yeah, like, is it a directed acoustic weapon? Is it a mass psychogenic illness?
Or just environmental factors. It has been the absolute definition of a mystery illness.
But in the Redacted interview, Beltran and Zaul, they demand their audience stop looking at it as a mystery.
Right, they completely recontextualize the phenomenon.
The broadcast asserts that Havana Syndrome victims are the living proof of graphene oxide-based thought control.
Which is just, wow.
They map the specific neurological symptoms of Havana Syndrome directly onto the physiological rejection of these nanoparticles.
Or the active weaponized firing of them within the brain.
It's a brilliant, albeit incredibly dark, rhetorical strategy.
It really is.
Imagine looking at a vast, dying forest, okay?
Okay.
For a decade, botanists and climate scientists are arguing over the cause. Is it a new fungal infection? Is it a shift in the water table?
Right, it's a localized mystery.
Exactly. Then someone walks into the forest and says, it's not a mystery illness. We have identified the exact chemical footprint of an experimental airborne defoliant on the leaves.
Ah, I see.
They aren't just pointing at the damage, they are claiming to have found the specific mechanism causing it.
Right. They are taking a phenomenon that already possesses immense public credibility.
Because the suffering of these diplomats is a matter of congressional record.
Exactly. And they're using it as a Trojan horse for their synthetic telepathy theory.
The rhetorical power of that mapping just cannot be overstated.
It can't. Because synthetic telepathy is an abstract, almost impenetrable concept for the average listener.
It sounds like a cyberpunk novel.
Totally. But the destroyed career of a CIA officer stationed in Cuba, That is tangible.
Very real.
By claiming Havana Syndrome is the physical fallout of this technology, they ground a highly theoretical, invisible weapon in real-world documented pain.
It forces the listener to look at every news article about Havana Syndrome not as a medical anomaly, but as a battlefield casualty report.
Exactly. But wait, let's test the logic of that mapping for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Havana Syndrome, especially in its initial waves, was highly localized and targeted.
Right. It hit diplomats in the U.S. Embassy in Havana, intelligence officers in Vienna, specific personnel in China.
Yeah. So if Beltran and Zaul are claiming this graphene oxide technology is already deployed worldwide on a mass scale.
The symptom cluster should be statistically distributed everywhere across the civilian population.
Right. Not surgically targeting intelligence officers in very specific geopolitical hotspots.
Ah, that's a really good point. But the broadcast actually addresses this targeting.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they lean into the origin story of the technology itself.
Okay.
The sources claim that before this became a system for mass application, it was initially developed as a suite of tools specifically meant for intelligence agents.
Oh, I see. Like secure, unhackable, mind-to-mind communication.
Exactly. Or a way to cognitively monitor an asset deep in hostile territory.
Okay, so therefore, in their narrative, it makes a twisted sort of logical sense that intelligence personnel would be the primary or initial victims.
Right. They might be experiencing the tech misfiring. They might be the subjects of extreme localized beta testing.
Or perhaps most chillingly, they are being actively targeted by rival state agencies who have also acquired and weaponized the exact same graphene infrastructure.
Which is just a nightmare scenario. Lone Wolf actually adds a horrifying layer to this during his commentary on the interview.
What does he say?
He states, "Every Havana Syndrome case is a warning sign screaming at us to pay attention."
Wow.
Yeah. He is explicitly framing this suffering not as an accidental glitch in the system, but as a weaponized system already in play.
But even with that recontextualization, medical symptoms can be endlessly debated.
Right, because two neurologists can look at the same brain scan of a Havana Syndrome patient and come to completely different conclusions about the etiology of the scarring.
Exactly. A medical debate provides way too much ambiguity for the narrative Lone Wolf is building.
Which perfectly explains why the narrative abruptly pivots away from medical science.
Right, and introduces an entirely different evidentiary standard.
Yes. To bypass the ambiguity of medical diagnoses, Beltran and Zaul introduce a legal anchor.
The MI6 whistleblower.
The MI6 whistleblower. Let's dissect the specific profile they build for this individual because the details are highly curated.
Oh, definitely.
The redacted interview doesn't just claim they have a leak from a generic government worker.
No. He described this individual as an Oxford-educated former asset who worked directly with British intelligence.
Specifically MI6.
Right. Every adjective in that description is designed to construct a hierarchy of credibility.
Because in the landscape of alternative media, an anonymous source is easily dismissed.
Totally. But by branding this person as Oxford-educated, the broadcast signals elite intellect and high-level institutional access to the listener.
Yeah, and by identifying them as a former asset of MI6, they establish profound insider status.
The subtext is clear. This isn't a civilian guessing at shadows.
No.
This is an architect who has been inside the black sites.
And crucially, this insider hasn't just gone on a rival podcast or written a manifesto on a blog somewhere.
Right. The sources point out that this individual has an active lawsuit against British intelligence.
Beltran and Zaul present this lawsuit as the ultimate, quote, critical paper trail.
Yeah, and I find this reliance on the legal system fascinating.
Why is that?
Well, anyone can file a lawsuit about anything, right? Filing a document in a clerk's office doesn't magically make the claims inside it true.
Oh, of course not.
So why do they lean so heavily on a court filing as their incontrovertible proof?
I think because a lawsuit represents a formal, structural challenge to a state institution.
Right.
When a claim moves from an interview into a legal filing, it crosses a threshold of consequence.
It does. Filing a lawsuit against a state intelligence apparatus subjects the filer to immense life-altering scrutiny.
Yeah, it demands the eventual production of evidence. It requires sworn testimony under the penalty of perjury.
And it opens the individual up to countersuits or prosecution if the claims are fabricated.
Exactly. The broadcast is leveraging the stakes of the legal system.
They are arguing that no elite, Oxford-educated asset would willingly subject themselves to the meat grinder of a national security lawsuit unless they possessed absolute proof of the graphene oxide deployment.
Lone Wolf explicitly highlights this exact dynamic in the broadcast. He delivers what the transcript refers to as a lone wolf roar.
Oh, really? Yeah, stating, lawsuits like this are rare for a reason. When an insider risks it all, the rest of us better start listening and pushing harder.
Wow.
And according to the interview, these court documents supposedly confirm the use of graphene oxide for synthetic telepathy and thought control.
And we have to recognize how this functions within the closed-loop ecosystem of the echoes from the Edge narrative.
What do you mean by closed loop?
Well, if the lawsuit proceeds and reveals documents, it proves them right.
Okay, sure.
But if the lawsuit is quickly dismissed by a judge, or if the files are sealed under the Official Secrets Act or national security exemptions,
The broadcast will simply frame that institutional suppression as the ultimate proof of the cover-up.
exactly. The mere existence of the lawsuit serves as an irrefutable anchor for their audience, regardless of the actual legal outcome.
That is wild. It creates a permanent, undeniable data point.
Yes.
So the architecture of their argument is fully built at this point.
Right. We have the theoretical weapon in graphene oxide. We have the physical victims in Havana Syndrome.
And we have the institutional paper trail in the MI6 lawsuit.
Right. So with that foundation laid, the Friday finale shifts its focus to the ultimate consequence.
Like, what actually happens to human society if this infrastructure is truly operational?
Exactly. Which brings us to the concept of the graphene panopticon and what Lone Wolf calls the extinction of mental privacy.
This is really the philosophical core of the entire broadcast.
It is.
It's where the narrative transcends just exposing a hidden government program and becomes an existential warning about the fundamental alteration of the human experience.
Yeah, the broadcast delivers a massive gut punch regarding the capabilities of this system.
Because if synthetic telepathy can monitor human thought on a mass scale,
The inevitable, horrifying next step is the ability to punish thoughts.
punishable thoughts. I mean, that concept completely dismantles the bedrock of human justice and morality.
Absolutely. Our entire legal and social framework is built entirely on actions and occasionally the intent behind an action.
Right. If I sit in my living room and vividly imagine stealing a car, but I never touch a set of keys, I've committed no crime.
No crime at all. The internal monologue is the ultimate safe space.
It's the drafting room where we are allowed to process dark impulses.
Yeah, to entertain radical concepts or just vent profound anger without real-world consequence.
And that drafting room of the mind is essential for human development and freedom.
It really is. You are allowed to design terrible things in your head as long as you refuse to build them.
But what Beltran, Zaul, and Lone Wolf are describing is a system that shatters the walls of that drafting room.
And replaces them with two-way glass.
Exactly. It bypasses the physical world, where actions actually take place, and criminalizes the biological process of cognition itself.
Which is terrifying, because if the internal monologue becomes a monitored crime scene, justice morphs into literal pre-crime.
Right, Minority Report style.
Exactly. If a citizen can be flagged, penalized, or socially crippled for a fleeting thought of political dissent.
Or just a flash of frustration with a leader.
Right, or even a moment of unorthodox doubt. The concept of human freedom ceases to exist.
And Lone Wolf is absolute in his assessment of this. The broadcast states definitively that if this technology is allowed to stand, freedom is over.
He doesn't say privacy will be heavily regulated or diminished.
No, he says it will face extinction.
Extinction.
The choice of the word extinction is deliberate. It implies a permanent, irreversible end to a species trait.
We've talked about the concept of the panopticon before, right?
Yeah, the 18th century architectural design for a prison.
Right, where a single guard sits in a central tower surrounded by a circle of backlit cells.
And the prisoners can't see into the tower, so they never know the exact moment they're being watched.
Exactly. And because they must assume they are always being watched, they internalize the surveillance and begin to police their own behavior.
But a physical panopticon still has blind spots.
You can hide under a blanket.
You can just close your eyes.
Yeah. But what the echoes from the Edge broadcast is describing is a graphene panopticon.
Meaning there is no physical tower.
The guard tower is constructed inside the neural pathways.
Wow.
The synthetic telepathy infrastructure removes the need for physical proximity. It strips humanity of its last sovereign territory.
Because when you lose the guarantee that your thoughts belong solely to you, you lose sovereignty over your own existence.
The baseline of what it means to be a free human being is irrevocably altered.
And the most terrifying aspect of the narrative Beltran and Zaul present is the timeline.
Oh, yeah. They refuse to allow the listener the comfort of distance.
Right. This isn't a dystopian novel warning us about what might happen in 50 years if we don't change our voting habits.
No, they hammer home the point repeatedly.
Yeah.
This graphene panopticon is not approaching. It is already here.
Which is a vital rhetorical tactic,
Yes.
burning that bridge to the future.
How so?
Well, if the threat is 50 years away, the listener can passively sign a petition and go back to sleep.
Right.
But by insisting the deployment is already active, the broadcast creates an immediate physiological state of panic.
The house is already fully engulfed in flames.
Exactly. Which catapults us directly into the climax of the Friday finale.
Because the stakes presented are existential, the literal extinction of free thought, the broadcast cannot simply end with a somber sign-off.
No, it erupts into a highly aggressive martial call to action.
The mobilization phase of Lone Wolf's broadcast is, honestly, a masterclass in triggering an adrenaline response to bypass logical scrutiny.
It really is. The language Lone Wolf uses in his closing remarks is dialed up to a fever pitch.
There is a relentless emphasis on the immediate timeline. He tells his audience they need to be waking up this weekend.
He explicitly states the fight doesn't end Friday. It starts right now.
He demands that his listeners be ready for war by Monday morning.
I mean, just analyze the specific vocabulary there. Fight, war, savage.
It's martial combative language.
Exactly. It frames the situation not as a complex geopolitical policy issue that requires careful deliberation,
but as an immediate life or death battle for biological survival.
And when a broadcaster uses martial language, they are actively shifting the listener's nervous system into a fight-or-flight state.
Ah, I see.
In that state, nuance and critical questioning are suppressed in favor of immediate, decisive action.
It's a brilliant psychological pivot.
Because if you listen to the first 4/5 of that broadcast,
Learning about inescapable synthetic telepathy, the neurological destruction of Havana Syndrome,
the compromised intelligence agencies, and the death of mental privacy.
you are inevitably left feeling completely paralyzed.
Right. You feel like a microscopic, helpless victim facing an omnipotent, invisible state apparatus.
But the call to action provides the antidote to that induced paralysis.
Yes. Lone Wolf doesn't leave his audience in despair.
By issuing specific aggressive commands, he transforms the listener from a passive victim into an active soldier in a resistance movement.
And the demands are incredibly specific. Beltran, Zaul, and Lone Wolf lay out a multi-pronged attack plan.
First, they demand full, unredacted declassification.
They want their listeners demanding that the hidden DARPA grants, the black budget line items, and the proprietary nanotech files be dragged into the sunlight.
Second, they demand aggressive pressure for congressional and parliamentary hearings.
Right. They want elected representatives forced to answer questions about graphene oxide thought control on the public record.
And third, they weaponize their own audience's social networks.
Lone Wolf actually instructs them to share this truth like your mind depends on it.
To which the underlying threat is, because it does.
Exactly. Let's look at how demanding declassification functions as a rhetorical trap, though.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
It locks the listener permanently into the narrative. Lone Wolf tells them that full transparency and real accountability, meaning intelligence directors going to prison, are the only ways to stop the nightmare.
Okay.
So if the audience demands declassification and the government ignores them or denies the existence of the technology,
The broadcast frames that denial as proof of the cover-up.
yes, deepening the listener's distrust of the state and reliance on Lone Wolf.
And if the government were to acknowledge even a fraction of directed energy research, the broadcast claims total victory.
It's an unwinnable situation for the institutions being accused and a perfect retention strategy for the broadcaster.
It fosters a profound sense of insular community, too.
Absolutely.
No.
You are no longer alone in your terror. You are part of the pack that Lone Wolf is mobilizing.
You have a target, you have a schedule, and you have a mission for Monday morning.
So, stepping back and analyzing the entire architecture of the echoes from the edge with the Lone Wolf Friday finale.
It is a staggering piece of narrative construction.
They introduced a deeply complex pseudoscientific claim regarding graphene oxide and synthetic telepathy.
They bypass the logistical impossibility of a secret global rollout by claiming non-consensual human experimentation.
Right. And then brilliantly mapped that invisible technology onto the highly visible real-world suffering of Havana Syndrome victims.
Transforming a medical mystery into a weapons test.
They bypass the ambiguity of medical science by introducing an elite, Oxford-educated MI6 whistleblower.
using the severe stakes of the legal system as an incontrovertible paper trail for their audience.
They escalated the threat from physical surveillance to the existential extinction of mental privacy.
Painting a terrifying picture of a graphene panopticon where the internal monologue is monitored and thoughts are punishable.
And finally, they synthesized all of that induced terror into a highly mobilized, martial call to action.
Demanding declassification and transforming their listeners into an active resistance force.
It is an incredibly heavy, dense stack of source material.
It is. And regardless of where anyone stands on the validity of these specific claims,
Whether you view this as the most vital whistleblowing event in modern history or a highly elaborate, destructive piece of alternative media fiction.
the exercise of unpacking it is essential.
It really is. Understanding the mechanics of how these arguments are built is the ultimate critical thinking defense.
We have to be able to dissect how disparate data points, like a novel nanomaterial and an embassy health crisis, are woven together to create a unified theory.
We must recognize how urgency and adrenaline are manufactured through martial language.
Because in an information landscape that is increasingly complex and weaponized, the ability to analyze the rhetorical architecture of a broadcast rather than simply absorbing its panic is vital.
We have to keep our own internal drafting rooms clear.
Exactly. Which brings me back to the concept of the mind as the ultimate sanctuary.
Right.
We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing the terror of an external entity monitoring or punishing our thoughts via synthetic telepathy.
We've discussed the graphene panopticon as a system of observation.
But if we take the technological premise outlined by Beltran and Zaul to its absolute most terrifying logical conclusion,
Observation is only half the equation.
the true edge of the abyss is manipulation.
Precisely.
Because if a technology, whether it is graphene oxide, nanoparticles acting as microscopic antennas, or some other undiscovered mechanism entirely,
If it truly allowed an external state actor to interface directly with the human nervous system.
what happens when the signal isn't just being received by the tower but broadcast back into the cell?
Oh, man.
If a system can monitor the internal monologue, it is only a matter of time before it can inject data into it.
And at that point, the demarcation line between the organic self and the synthetic system completely dissolves.
Completely. If the voice inside your head, the quiet impulse telling you to purchase a specific product, the sudden, unearned surge of rage toward a specific political group,
Or even the deep-seated urge to conform, or the decision to rebel.
if that voice sounds exactly like your own authentic internal monologue, how would you ever be able to distinguish the organic thought from the synthetically implanted one?
You couldn't.
How do you defend against a home invasion when the intruder is wearing your own face and speaking in your own voice?
It's a terrifying thought to leave on.
It is, because if you can no longer trust the origin of your own inner voice, who are you really?